Okay, so this is the final product of the Traxxas Rad 2 that I had talked about a couple of months ago when I first got the car. I haven't made a whole lot of changes to it. Really, it was just a matter of installing electronics and putting the big bore shocks on and making a few minor tweaks to the car, and that's pretty much it. So as far as the electronics go, you know, you can use whatever you want. I'm really digging the some of the Turnigy servos. The TSD99X is a low profile servo that gets a little over 100 ounce inches of torque at 6 volts and has a very fast transit time, like 0.09 seconds. So that's really on par with some rather high-end name brand servos, and this servo is like 30 bucks. So really good deal. You can get a couple of them so that if you break one, you can replace it with another $30 servo, and you've still spent less than something like a Futaba or Sanwa servo. So that's what I put in this. And for the speed control, because I want to run this in the Vintage Off-Road Nationals Classic class, which uses a brushed handout motor, so you have to use a brushed speed control. I found a really nice Novak Eraser speed control on eBay, and I just had to resolder a new set of wires onto it. So that's what's sitting right there through the window that you can see. This here is a Lipo voltage monitor. It's always a good idea to have those when you're running Lipo batteries on older style speed controls that don't have any kind of Lipo shutoff circuitry. Okay, and then on the inside here, actually, let me see if I can just take this off, make this a little easier. I'll do this, this, here we go. Okay, so this is where the TSD99X servo is mounted, low profile servo. I have my transponder right behind it. I could also mount it on top if I wanted, doesn't really matter. And then my receiver is here, and that gives me space essentially to mount a shorty Lipo all the way toward the front of this Lipo, or really the battery tray, and I just have foam spacers in the back here. So the reason why I want to mount run a shorty Lipo, mount it towards the front, is because this is a pretty rear heavy car, and if you're going to run this on like high grip, hard packed dirt, which is presently where the VONATS race is held, that type of track surface is what they run. You want a bit more weight distribution toward the front. So when I got this car, the actual battery tray, the previous owner cut out the front sort of boundary of that battery tray. I'm not exactly sure why they did it, but that does allow me to push the battery a little bit further forward if I wanted to. So essentially, the way the receiver is mounted right now, it's the back edge of that receiver is right up to where the front edge of the battery tray was cut out. So if I really wanted to push the battery further forward, instead of mounting the receiver flat like this, I could mount it more upright, and that would buy me a few millimeters, maybe a centimeter or so, to move the battery even further forward. But anyway, if I mount a shorty and run it further forward, that pushes the weight a little further forward, and should give me a bit more steering. So that's one of the things I plan on doing here. I did also replace a couple of the screws here with titanium screws. The stock screws these come with are Phillips head steel screws that are self-tapping. So I tried to go around and put some lighter weight screws that are not self-tapping in here, just to save a little bit of weight, and also to try to preserve the plastics a little bit, so that if you're screwing and unscrewing a particular part, you're not really beating up the plastic that is screwing into, similar to the older Tamiya kits, or even some of the modern Tamiya kits. A little bit more on the steering. The Rad 2, as far as I understand it, comes standard with 15-degree caster blocks. So I just bought the 25-degree caster blocks. That's kind of an upgrade. And the reason why you would want to run a higher caster is so that you get essentially more mid-corner steering. So a low caster angle gives you a much sharper response on initial turn-in. But what you'll find is in the middle of the corner, the car feels like it's pushing. And that has to do with how caster impacts the rate of camber angle change as the wheel is turning. Okay, and that's a larger caster angle gives you more camber change as the wheel turns, which means that when you're at full lock going mid-corner, the outer wheel has a bit more grip. Okay, so most modern cars have 25 or 30 degrees of caster. Some of the older cars, like the RC10 Classic, for instance, that also comes with caster blocks with a low caster angle, like 10 or 15 degrees. I don't quite understand why they did it at that time. It's not clear to me. But nevertheless, you're very likely better off with 25 degree caster blocks. So that's what I put here. Other than that, really there's not much that I did. I do have a ball diff that I could install in this gearbox, but I want to save those ball diffs for my Traxxas Nitro Hawk and Nitro Buggy electric conversions, which I'm currently working on. The gear diff in this is fine, and again, this is a classic class car. You don't necessarily need a ball diff, or at least you shouldn't. So yeah. Let's see, what else did I do? Kind of little things here and there. On this side, maybe it's a little bit gimmicky, but I am running the Polypro plastic pinion gears. These are a narrower cut of a gear than a conventional steel pinion gear, and because they're made of, I don't know that I would call it plastic, but it is a molded composite. These are much lighter weight than a standard pinion gear. So when you're running something like, a silver can or a sport-tuned hand-out motor, you want to try to save rotational mass wherever possible. So this is one way to do it. That's also another reason why I was considering maybe running a ball diff in this gearbox, because the ball diff should have less rotational mass than the gear diff. But at the same time, I'm kind of thinking I want to keep the gear diff in there just to keep the drivetrain simple. So, whatever rotational mass I'm saving by running this pinion gear here would likely pale in comparison to just changing the gear diff out for a ball diff. But in any case, I figured this would be kind of cool to run, I just think it would be kind of neat. So that's kind of it. So a little bit on the lightweight screws, right? Some titanium and aluminum screws, the front caster blocks, a little bit on the electronic setup here, pinion gear in the back, and the only other thing is the body. So the Traxxas Rad 2 body doesn't look like this. It looks a little bit different. And when I got this car, it did come with a body that was painted and a little bit beat up. You presently cannot find reproduction Rad 2 bodies from either of Team Blue Groove or Penguin. I guess they just don't have bodies to use as a reference to make repro bodies with. Now, as luck would have it, the Traxxas Bandit body does actually fit pretty nicely. You do have to, cut it a little bit, but it does fit. And the reason why this fits and the TRX3 body does not fit is because the Bandit is wider at the front here. And as you can see, the Rad 2 chassis is kind of the same width front to rear. It tapers out a little bit, but it's pretty wide going from the rear all the way to the front. On something like the TRX3 that has a much more tapered chassis design. And even, a lot of the other two-wheel drive buggies from that era, they have a much more tapered chassis. So you can't take something like an RC10 body or a Tamiya Dyna-Storm body or a Traxxas TRX3 body and put it on this, because the front nose of the body will be too narrow to fit around the front portion of the chassis here. But the Bandit body does actually fit pretty nicely, so I'm rather pleased with that. I did take this out in the driveway and test drive it, and it seems to drive pretty nicely. It's going to need a few trim adjustments, but otherwise it should be ready to go. So, yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.